Good day everyone, we are the Group 4 and we are assigned to report Krashen's Comprehensible Input. The content of our report will be the monitor model, Krashen's 5 hypotheses of SLA or the second language acquisition, comprehensible input, and determining the input hypothesis level of instruction. Let's proceed now to the monitor model. Over the last 30 years, researchers have generated a number of theories in order to better understand and explain human behavior. These have made great contributions in the field of SLA research. In the late 1970s, Krashen developed the monitor model, an overall theory of SLA that had important implications for language teaching. Theories of language acquisition. SLA theories were developed along the lines of L1 acquisition theories. Over the past 3 decades, studies on how L1 is acquired, describing its stages of development, and aid at assessing whether SLA follows a similar route to that of L1 acquisition. SLA theories are divided into 2 broad categories: the nurture and nature. As what you can see on the screen, nurture posits that human interaction with the environment leads to acquisition of human knowledge. The behaviorist perspective is perhaps the most well-known among language acquisition theories and appears to be strictly based on nurture doctrine. While nature, the naturalistic perspective, stresses the importance of genetic factors. Knowledge is innate and transmitted genetically, holds that all human beings are born with a device that allows us to acquire knowledge naturally, and the language acquisition is biologically determined.
Next is Krashen's 5 hypotheses in second language acquisition. First of which is the acquisition learning. Learning cannot become acquisition, and that fluency in a second or foreign language is due to what learners have acquired, not what they have learned. That is to say that learning acquisition is about meaningful interaction and the conscious knowledge about the language. One acquires or picks up the second language in much the same way as one acquired the first language by using it. Formal instruction is distinct from acquisition and may be helpful, but it is not essential to learning a second language.
Second hypothesis is the natural order of acquisition, where learners acquire the rules of a language in a predictable sequence. It is found in both language acquisition by children and adults alike. In case of second language, natural order exists regardless of the acquirers of first language. Later findings show that this hypothesis is valid for other language acquisition as well. Krashen, however, points out that the implication of the natural order hypothesis is not that a language program syllabus should be based on the order found in the studies. In fact, he rejects grammatical sequencing when the goal is language acquisition.
Let's move on to the third hypothesis, the monitor. When the learned system acts as a monitor, making minor changes and polishing what the acquired system has produced. This hypothesis explains the relationship between acquisition and learning and defines the influence of the latter on the former. According to Krashen, the acquisition system is the adherence initiator, while the learning system performs the role of the monitor or the editor. The monitor acts in a planning, editing, and correcting function when 3 specific conditions are met. First is the second language learner has sufficient time at their disposal. Second is they focus on form or think about correctness. And last is they know the rule. According to Krashen, the role of the monitor is minor, being used only to correct deviations from normal speech and to give speech a more polished appearance. As the learner develops skills and competence in second language, he or she begins to correct and modify his or her speech to conform to the model speech and written language of native speakers of the target language. Another is affective filter hypothesis, which is the learner's state of mind or disposition. There exists a filter or mental block that impede second language from getting in. filter is associated with relaxation, confidence to take risks, and a pleasant learning environment. In other words, when the filter is up, it impedes language acquisition. On the other hand, positive effect is necessary but not sufficient on its own for acquisition to take place.
Now we are in input hypothesis. An important condition for language to occur is that the acquirer understand, via hearing or reading, input language that contains structure a bit beyond his or her current level of competence. Human acquires language by understanding messages or by receiving comprehensible input and learning improve and progress along the natural order. When they receive L2 comprehensible input. Krashen, 1985.
So, when we say comprehensible input, it is a language input that can be understood by listener despite them not understanding all the words and structures in it. So, it refers to language that is intelligible but just a little more advanced than the student's current ability to understand it. This means that the overall message of the language is clear even though some words and grammatical structures may be unfamiliar. It also described as one level above that of the learners if it can only be understood. So according to Krashen's theory of language acquisition, giving learners this kind of input helps them acquire language naturally rather than learn it consciously. It also is necessary for language acquisition. Comprehensible input needs to be compelling and repeated in different contexts at different times in interesting ways. It's difficult to pin down the exact recipe, and we can control when or what the students will acquire. We can only control the input we give. So, think back to the plant graphic above. We can manage the light, the water, and air the plant receives, but the growth itself isn't something in our control. So, it's up to the learners of how they comprehend the input we give to them. So, we also have a formula for comprehensible input. Simple and elegant expression I plus 1. The letter I stands for input, which is the student's current language ability level. The plus 1 is exposure to slightly more advanced language that lead to acquisition. So when we combine both parts of the statement into I plus 1 or input plus 1, we give students a task that is challenging yet achievable. And by the way, input is what you're putting in the learner's ears and eyes, whether it be audio, video, or written language. The I plus 1 expression is our key to understanding Krashen's hypothesis. So, for example, we may have a student who struggles with correct capitalization usage in English because her first language does not commonly use capitalization. Similarly, we might have a student who struggles with proper syntax in English because his first language was Spanish, for example, uses different syntax rules. So, determining the right I plus 1 level of instruction. So, the key to knowing the appropriate value of input to incorporate into instruction is to get to know our students and their backgrounds. This requires time, patience, and diagnostic tools such as entrance exams, writing samples, and even simple conversations with our students. We must first identify the current language ability levels of students as well as their language backgrounds in order to find the perfect input plus 1 support structures. So, comprehensible input doesn't mean that the input contains words and phrases that students already know. Rather, comprehensible input seeks to effectively integrate new and unknown linguistic data with familiar ones to make the received input just a bit more difficult. In other words, instance, a successful comprehensible input provides enough known information for students to understand